my name is Marissa. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Director of Operations at York Region Food Network. And today, sorry, I just lost my spot here. Today my job is to host and manage the chat of this workshop. And we're in for a really great treat today because we have Susan Poizner here with us, who will be facilitating the workshop. And I'm going to give you all a proper introduction to her in just a moment. So I just wanted to get into a little land acknowledgement. So although we may be connecting virtually right now due to COVID, I encourage fellow settlers to take a moment and reflect on the history of the land that you are currently tuning in from. And we do this with the acknowledgement of the intertwining legacies of settler colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade. I am currently on Williams Treaty territory. This is traditionally cared for by the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabes people. We have our neighbors, the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation, as our closest Indigenous community, about an hour and 15 minutes just northeast of us. So in the same way that learning a person's name is a very necessary first step in developing a relationship with them, a land acknowledgement can be a vital first step in learning who lived and continues to live in this land. The first steps always need to be followed up by many more steps, and then of course, many more actions. So we can acknowledge the land and still harm it. And we can acknowledge Indigenous people and still have no connection to them. So how can we do better? Some questions that I and my team here have been asking ourselves and encourage everyone to are, what does it mean to be a treaty person? What are the principles and responsibilities that we have in relationship to each other as human beings and to this land that sustains us? I welcome you to brainstorm a bit and even share in the comments if you have any resources or responses. If you are outside of York Region, I encourage you to share the traditional territory information for the land that you are currently on as a step in better understanding our role as guests on this land. Now, when we talk about pruning our fruit trees and we think about our connection and impact on the environment, we are talking about the land and how it gives to us and how we care for it. So as we get a little bit more into the content of this workshop, let's just continue to investigate and bring to the forefront these questions. So let me properly introduce you now to our facilitator today, Susan Poizner. Susan is an urban orchardist and fruit tree educator who teaches at Niagara College in Ontario and online at orchardpeople.com. Susan is the author of the award-winning fruit tree care book, Growing Urban Orchards, the host of Urban Forestry radio show and podcast, and is an ISA certified arborist. We are so very excited to have you today here with us to share your story and your expertise. Thank you for being with us, and I'm going to let you take the reins from here. Oh, 1 second. I know that we wanted to, that you had asked to get to know a little bit about the people that are joining us today. So Susan wanted to know a little bit about everybody. If anybody here has fruit trees or is planning to plant some fruit trees, if anybody has had problems with their fruit trees or challenges with some fruit trees, if you just want to type that into the chat and give us a little bit of information about how you came to this workshop, we would love to learn a little bit more about you. Sorry, thank you, Susan. Here, take it over.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful introduction. I really appreciate that. That was lovely. So yes, everybody, I would love to hear from you in the chat box. Tell me if you have a fruit tree, if you're thinking of planting one. And in a minute, we're going to go through and find out a little bit more about you. But first, maybe Marissa, you can activate screen sharing and I will start. Sharing my screen. So let's see. And I see some answers are already coming in. So I look forward to seeing those in a minute. So hopefully I am sharing my screen. Let's start our presentation here. Okay, everybody. So first, a little bit about me. This is me, and this is many years ago. So I was involved in planting Toronto's first community orchard in a public park That's me in Toronto in the Ben Nobleman Park community orchard and watering a young tree. At the time, I was an organic gardener. I actually was working for the city as an organic gardener, and I thought fruit trees were going to be easy. Haha, surprise, the joke was on me. So I thought it would be pretty straightforward. And then I started to realize that actually these trees need more care than I know how to give them. They needed to be pruned, and I had no idea how. I had no idea why. I just knew fruit tree pruning was a thing, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I had to hustle to find somebody to help me. And Norm Herbert was from a company that you may or may not recognize. In the chat box, tell me if you've heard of E.D. Smith. E.D. Smith Farms. I'd love to know if you remember that. I remember that. So Norm was their orchard manager for 25 years and the sweetest guy you'll ever meet. And he agreed he would come in and teach me and the gang in the orchard how to prune the fruit trees. So does he look like a sweet guy or what? Put it in the chat box. You think he looks sweet? I think he does. What a honey. So he comes to our orchard and he looks at our beautiful little trees. Now, at that time, we didn't even have an irrigation system, guys. So we had to water these trees by hauling buckets around the park. So we were very proud of how they were doing, and look how lovely those trees were when they were blossoming. Norm admired our work, and he seemed to be like a pretty good person. And I thought, well, this is the right person to get to help me with my fruit trees. And then it all went downhill. Norm turned into a crazy, crazy, crazy guy. And he started to hack up our trees, and he was laughing as we were literally holding each other close to tears, thinking, what is he doing to our baby fruit trees? We've worked so hard to raise the money to make this happen, to get this, and he's hacking up our fruit trees like a crazy person. So that is one of the fruit trees after he finished with it. Now, you can imagine I was pretty upset and pretty concerned. And now what I do is I teach people how to hack up their own fruit trees, especially when they're young. You need to reshape these fruit trees. This is not a tree, a native tree, and like a native tree in nature in a forest that mostly you leave alone. You prune out diseased branches, maybe crisscross branches. Fruit tree pruning is a very specific thing with specific purposes, and we're going to talk about that today. So just to remind you, there's the tree before and there's the tree after. How do you guys feel about that, huh? Would you love to meet Norm Herbert on the street near your fruit tree? Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about today. We will talk about why we prune. We'll talk about the difference between winter versus summer pruning. We will talk about ideal tree shape, buds and directions, and winter pruning in 5 steps. And all of this, we're going to try and get into about 40 minutes. But very quickly, Marissa, what did we have? So what kind of trees do people have?
Well, let's take a quick look here. We have an old property with some overgrown apple trees. 2 pear trees we have over here, some very young apple trees at a community garden, 2 peach trees, a cherry tree, I don't know, another overgrown apple tree, lots of apple trees. You have lots of apple trees, and we have some young pawpaw seedlings that are currently overwintering in a shed, and they want to learn how to care for them in the future. Bosch pear tree. Oh, lots, like an orchard here, 7 apple trees, and what is this? And a cherry tree, and serviceberry trees you've got going. What else do we have? A pear and a blackberry tree that need pruning. Apple tree and another apple and pear. So you got lots of people that have trees.
Okay, great. This is wonderful. So here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to start talking about younger fruit trees. So we'll start from the beginning. When you plant a tree, when it's young, you start to shape and prune it. For those of you with older trees, we will get there. But you need to pay attention in the beginning, because when we're talking about how we prune younger trees, you'll start to get a picture of what your older tree really should be looking like. Maybe you inherited the tree, it was already old. Maybe you didn't prune the tree, you didn't know, that's fine too. But all of this will come together in the end, and you'll understand how it all comes together. For the older fruit tree owners, for people who have young trees, this is going to be great too, because you're going to find out how to care for them so that they won't be overgrown when they're older. So let's dive in. So why do you prune fruit trees altogether? Because, you think about trees in nature, they take care of themselves, no problem at all. Sometimes an arborist may come in if there's a branch that's going to fall on your house. If there's some disease, you might get your arborist in to take care of the tree. Mostly, though, they take care of themselves. But fruit trees are different. And you can put in the chat box why you think they're different and why we would prune them differently. So pop that in the chat box really quickly, and we will then go to the next slide. I want to make sure that you guys are on your toes thinking. Okay, so why do we prune fruit trees? Well, there are a number of reasons. So when you have a fruit tree, you need each branch to have equal access to sunshine. Why do you think that is? Fruit needs to be ripened by the sun. And if the branch is shaded from the sun, then your fruit will not ripen properly. So when you have an overgrown tree with an overgrown canopy, I'm going to bet that the fruit doesn't even taste very good. It may be small, it may be hard, and that's not the tree's fault. It's because it doesn't have access to the sun to ripen the fruit properly. Oh, a whole bunch of points all at once popped up. So the other thing we're looking for is air circulation. You want to make sure in this tree on the left, you see that there are just a few main sort of branches coming off the trunk. There's not a million of them, but if the wind is going to blow through that tree, it will blow right through, even when those branches are all leafed out. So you want to make sure that there's good air circulation that can blow through the tree, because that will prevent diseases like fungal diseases that love moist, damp, dark conditions. That prevents fungal diseases. So next, also, when you have fewer branches, you get more energy to the remaining branches. So if this little tree has 100 branches, each branch will get 1/100th of the energy that is being stored in the roots of the tree. So it'll have a little bit of energy to grow, just a little bit, okay? But if that tree has only 75 branches, each branch gets a little bit more energy to grow longer, maybe to produce a little fruit for you. So you're giving the remaining branches a bit more energy to do what they need to do. So next, a smaller tree. When you prune correctly, you can keep your tree compact. You have to do it at the right time of year, and we'll talk about that. A smaller tree is easier to prune, but it's also easier to harvest. It's easier to spray, and I'm talking about organic or holistic sprays, so good sprays, right? And so the bigger your tree is, the less control you're going to have over the whole thing, right? So that's one more advantage. And finally, this is more what people do with native trees. You remove, and you do it with fruit trees as well. You remove non-productive branches, broken branches, and diseased branches. Okay, I'm just going to change one thing here. Here we go. Right. So let's go back here. Now, this tree here, do you think this has ever been pruned? I don't think so. Looking at the tree, have a look. If this was fully leafed out, how would the air circulation be on this tree? Would the air be flowing easily through the branches? Not really. There'd be a lot of leaves in the way. So we can tell right away that this tree has pretty much never been pruned, this apple tree. And there you can see close up. How's the air circulation? To me, that looks like a perfect place for fungal diseases. Once the leaves that come out, they could hide in there. They get nice, moist, dark conditions, and they can thrive. And we don't want fungal diseases on our fruit trees. So that's not good. And contrast it with this tree. This tree has great air circulation. It's an old tree too. So somebody has been pruning it over the years, choosing carefully which branches to keep and which to remove. And so you could throw a football through this tree and it would just get to the other side. It would go right through the branches. That's what you're looking for, that much air circulation. And every branch will have access to sunshine to ripen the fruit and keep the fruit sweet and delicious. So how much air circulation do you need? This is in our orchard, one of our plum trees. That's an old plum tree now, but it wasn't then. And you can see a volunteer Lynn on the other side of the tree. So farmers say that you should be able to throw a small cat through the branches. Don't do this at home, please. Cats are lovely. We don't want to hurt them. But the cat would go right through the branches and fall through onto the other side. It would not get caught in a bunch of branches, leafy branches, right? So you should be able to throw a cat through your tree. I'd rather say a football. Some farmers are so extreme, they say you should be able to throw a small pig through the branches. That's how much air circulation they want. Really, fewer branches, better quality fruit. And some say, as a joke, well, a small cow, you should be able to throw a small cow through those branches and it would not get caught. Again, cows are super heavy. That's pretty extreme. Don't throw any living thing through the tree, but it's to give you that idea of how much air circulation we really need. So when do you start to prune your fruit trees? Some people say, oh, you should start when they're maybe 3 years old or 5 years old or whatever. Well, the answer is you should prune from the very day you plant your tree. And the reason that is because you need to create a tree that is strong and can support a healthy and heavy harvest. You look at this young tree, and somebody called Manon sent me the picture of her tree, and she said, oh, do you think it's time to prune this tree? Yes, from the very day that you plant a bare root tree, we can talk a little bit about that later. A potted tree, maybe you leave it for a year. But from the very planting day for a bare root tree, you will be cutting just like I showed you earlier, Norm Herbert would cut those branches because we want to create a strong structure. The problem with this tree is the person didn't prune it. They allowed the branches to get long. Those branches will break with the harvest. Now, the other problem that this situation has is that in the first 2 years, you really need to remove every single piece of fruit from that tree. Every single piece of fruit, because ultimately it's not about you at this point. It's about the tree, and the tree needs to establish itself. So in order for the tree to have lots of energy to spend on extending its root systems and strengthening its branches, it needs to keep all that energy for itself instead of pushing out fruit that we can enjoy. So this is such a hard thing to do, and it's a hard thing to recommend because I know everybody is excited to taste the fruit on their tree. 2 years. Wait 2 years, remove all the baby fruit, allow your lovely, sweet young fruit tree to establish itself and get stronger. Okay, so why is it important to start pruning fruit trees when they're young? We want to create a strong, weight-bearing structure that will last the tree's lifetime, which can be 25 years, 50 years, sometimes even 100 years. It's also easier to shape or train and prune a younger tree. The branches are thinner. You cut a little branch and it'll heal up quickly. If you cut a big branch, oh my gosh, you've got a big wound on the tree. It'll take years for that to heal. So better to be working with your young tree as you mold it into the perfect fruit-bearing shape. And as I mentioned to you before, pruning helps prevent pests and diseases by increasing air circulation. So it's actually strengthening the tree in lots of different ways. Okay, let's keep going. There's Manon's tree again. All right. Why is it important to prune older trees? And this is in my neighborhood, an older tree with lots of suckers and coming from the root system. It's kind of messy. Well, the reason is, again, we want good air circulation. We can still get good quality fruit out of an older tree. So it's important whatever the age. Okay, So how am I doing so far? Am I going too fast, too slow? I would love to hear or see. Can I see the chat? Tell me, guys, is this okay in terms of pace or any pressing questions so far? Just say okay if it's okay. All right, great. Good pace. Pace is great, doing good. Thank you, I appreciate that. It's just good to check in. Then there we go. Super, thank you, Cheryl. Okay, great. Okay, so now let's talk about how fruit trees grow because that is going to help us when we do our pruning. When you get a bare root tree, it's a really young fruit tree. So people think that they're getting ahead of the game. The older and the bigger the tree they get, the better. It's actually the opposite. The younger fruit trees, like super young, 1 year old, they adapt better to their soil and they actually grow faster. So a bare root tree will look like this. It'll be one stick with roots. It might have a few branches, it might not. So let's say you buy an order on from a specialist fruit tree nursery, a bare root tree, you plant it, and now you water it, you take care of it, you've watered it, and now it's ready for its very first pruning cut. So you will cut where I put that line. So you will cut off maybe a third, the top third of the tree. Okay, so let's see what will happen if I cut off that much of the tree. What happens is you're removing some buds. Now, you remember I told you if you have a tree with 100 branches, each branch gets 1/100th of the energy that's stored in the root system of the tree. It's the same here. If that whip, the young fruit tree, has 10 buds and you leave them all, then every bud will get 1/10 of the energy. But we've cut off 3 buds at the top one, and then the 2 below. So each bud gets a little bit more energy. So it pushes out stronger, bigger branches. So we see we made our cut above the bud, and then boom, the other branches sprout out. They're a little longer than they would be. Okay. So this just summarizes how trees grow. Well, you plant your young whip, which is a branch with the roots attached to it, and they've been grafted together, and you plant it in the early spring while this tree is dormant. You will only plant a bare root tree during the dormant season, springtime or fall. So we do our first pruning cut. We cut off anywhere from a few inches to up to 1/3 of the tree. Okay, so you can cut your whip down to anywhere from 15 to 36 inches tall, depending on the size of the whip. So you are going to mulch that tree. You're going to water it regularly. Like any young plant, it needs to establish itself, right? So you water it well, water it deeply and slowly, leave it to dry out for a few days, and then water it again. Okay, and that's where we're going to. We can see that the structure has begun to emerge. Okay, so I talked about buds. And buds were very mysterious to me when I first started doing pruning because there are different buds that look different. So when we prune, we're looking for 2 types of buds. The leaf buds are tight and snug against the branch. I don't know if you can see my cursor. This is a leaf bud. This is with an apple tree. So it's more, leaf buds are tighter, sort of cuddled up to the branch. The fruit buds, also called flower buds, are more in an apple tree. They're kind of plump and round. So why would you need to know the difference? Well, first of all, you don't want to accidentally cut off all your fruit if you have an older tree. You might go snipping away and then have no fruit on your tree because you've cut off all the fruiting buds. But moreover, we are kind of using the buds as a blueprint to help us decide where the branches are going to go on our tree. It'll all make sense in a minute. So a few definitions. Leaf buds grow into leaves. They're tight up against the branch. Terminal buds are at the end of branches and they will continue the growth of the branch. They will continue to grow, and flower buds will blossom and then fruit. Spurs, apple trees and pear trees also have spurs. They're little groupings of flower buds, which blossom and then turn into fruit. So you can see a spur here. And probably a little cluster of fruit because there's a number of them. And very young trees aren't mature enough to have many flower buds. So if you do what I suggest and work with a bare root tree that's very young, you're not going to see any flower buds for a little while, for a year or two. And that's just fine. So it's also easier to identify the flower buds in the spring because they're going to start swelling before they blossom, and then they take their full beautiful shape. Okay, guys, in the chat box, which are the leaf buds and which are the fruit buds, left or right? Let's just see your answers. Let's see, can I see the chat? So tell me, what do you see? Which are the leaf buds? Somebody said, Laura's saying leaf buds on right. Anybody else? Leaf on right, Greta. Left fruit, good, that's Sally. And Jen says leaf right. Okay, so you're getting the idea now. So let's see why this is going to be helpful to us. Okay, so here we are. These are a bunch of leaf buds on a branch held up against my husband's sweater for some reason. If there is a bud that you can see, this branch has been probably snipped off a tree. It's not still on the tree. But if the, where's my cursor here? Can I do this? Let's see. Okay, so let's say you've got the bud here that it's going downwards. Where is the branch going to go? It's going to continue the direction that the bud is in. So if you've got a bud at the top, it's going to keep going that way. This is what's not going to happen. A bud here will go a branch, grow a branch backwards or upwards. It's not going to do any of that. So the bud is basically pointing in the direction that the branch will grow. So hopefully that's not permanent. I don't want to leave that there forever. I don't think so. So here we're looking, sorry, it's a little bit messy here, but we're looking at a young fruit tree and the kind of pruning cuts we're going to make. So I think I still have my pencil here. So if I make this cut where the red line is, where is the branch going to grow? Will it grow up like this? Will it grow down or back? No, it's going to follow the direction of the bud and it's going to grow outwards. Okay, so same here. Is this cut going to have, what direction will the bud go? Can't really see that well, but probably it's going to go out this way. But if I were to make a cut, let me just find a cut I don't want to make. Let's say this, I wanted to make this cut here, right? And there's my bud. Where's the branch going to go, guys? So it's going to go in. It's going to go in towards the trunk of the tree. And that is not what we want, because that will do the opposite of allowing air circulation. So from this slide, I want you to understand that as we prune the tree, we are trying to organize the branches so that they are growing outwards, not inwards, not downwards, and not upwards. They are stretching out to the horizon and to keep that nice open shape. Okay, so that's a bad cut. That's this one. This is interesting. So there, I think the branch is going to go down. So if you can't really tell from this drawing, but if the bud really looks like it's going down, then no, it's not a good cut. And there's a good cut. The branch grows outwards. See if I can get rid of this pencil thing. I don't know how to get rid of that now. Let's see. Automatic. Let's see. I don't know what I've done. Okay, so branches and shaping your tree. Let's discuss that. How are we going to do this? So let's talk about, we're going to get back to that, the ideal shape of a tree. I need you guys to vote in the chat box. What is the ideal shape for a fruit tree? What kind of shape are we trying to prune it into? Should it be a circular shape? Should it be a triangular shape? Or should it be sort of pruned into a square? In the chat box, I'd love it if you could just give me a shout and tell me what you think. Okay, so Laura says round, Greta says triangle, Sally says round, square, says Jen with a question mark. Laz says circle, so round. Anybody else? Come on, I want to see a couple more votes. Everybody, if you can vote, I want you to vote. Is everybody shy? Okay, well, let's find out. So there's your answer. Okay, I'm just closing my chat box. We want it to be a triangle shape, and I'm going to explain why next. This is called central leader pruning technique. That's the kind of pruning that I do mostly. I do different types, but that's a really useful, easy, beginner-friendly type. And essentially, we are copying nature. Nature's figured this out because nature knows that the sun comes from up above. And if you want every branch to have access to the sun, well, the top branches would very easily shade out the bottom branches if they were all equal length. So in nature, you've got the shorter branches at the top, and then slowly it goes down into this lovely triangle shape. That is what we are copying. See, there's our triangle. So here we have our funny little fruit tree that we're going to try and shape into some sort of triangle. In order to do that, let's get a little bit of terminology happening. We need a central leader. Okay, so that is the single continuation of the trunk. In nature, in that sort of in a pine tree or something, often it goes straight up and down. Sometimes with a fruit tree, there might be disease, you might have to cut. So you just pick the branch that is most central, that is mostly upright. And that's called the central leader. There are also scaffold branches are the next priority. Those are the branches that come off of the trunk of the fruit tree. Okay, so there's your scaffold branches. Here we have 3 here, 4, 5, 6. 6 scaffold branches. This one, these 2 could also be considered scaffold branches. Then off of the scaffold branches, we have lateral branches. So each scaffold will turn into little mini sub branches, and that's what they are called, lateral branches. So we're going for, in central leader pruning, a Christmas tree shape. And the central leader is in the middle. Scaffold branches come horizontally off the trunk. Lateral branches come off of the scaffold branches, right? So here's my scaffold and there's my little laterals coming off. And this type of pruning can be used for cherries, pears, plums, apricots, and apples, and lots of other types of fruit trees. You would not do this with service berries or pawpaws. Service berries or pawpaws are native trees. They need very little pruning, but this is for your conventional fruit trees. So on the left, we can see we have a central leader. It's not straight, and that's okay. So here's our central leader right here going up. Hopefully you can see my cursor. Let me try doing something called a laser color. I don't know what that is. Let's try a laser color. What's that? Oh, that's not where I wanted to go. Let's go back. That shows, it's punishing me for trying something different. Okay, forget that one. So there we've got, I'm going to go here, pen. All right, so here we have our central leader, not quite straight. And here our central leader is quite straight, which is lovely. Let's keep going. So my goodness, sometimes you get all types of trees when you get, when you order a bare root tree. This one is a total mess. Adding insult to injury, somebody's hung a little Christmas or something decoration on it. Makes me feel quite sad. Poor little tree. And that's my friend Ray. He's about to prune this tree. But the good thing about this particular tree, it's got a pretty obvious central leader. So that's good to see. It's a nice straighten up and down branch. And there he is pruning another tree. And again, the central leader is pretty clear. Okay, so winter is the time that we are going to create that shape with our young fruit tree. So let's talk about winter pruning. Winter is great because you can see all the branches, right? It's not covered with leaves. So I want you in the winter to step back. You're about to prune your tree. Just analyze your tree. Have a look at it. Can you see which is the central leader? Which are the scaffold branches? What's what? And when you work with your tree, you're going to start from the top and go down. So central leader is very important. You always are going to make sure that there is lots of room between branches to ensure good air circulation. And this slide is to show that it is not rocket science. A bunch of goofy volunteers for the orchard can do it. For Ben Nobleman Park Community Orchard, if we can do it, you can do it. So it is really fun and it's, yeah, good time. So how about 5 easy steps for pruning fruit trees in the winter? Easy steps are always fun. And I always use this as a cue for my first step. The very first time I taught this class in person, I was listening to the radio, and believe it or not, it was International Alien Abduction Day. It was just the most bizarre thing. I've never heard of such a thing. And so I remember Alien Abduction Day, and I kind of chuckled to myself, because what do aliens say when they come to Earth and they want to take over, or even if they're just nice aliens? What do they say? Maybe you can guess in the chat box. They say, "Take me to your leader," which is exactly the first step of central pruning. Take me to your leader. Figure out which branch is your central leader. Okay, so your first job, step number 1, is to find or choose the tree's central leader. And if there are more than 2 potential leaders, you will pick the stronger one. So in this illustration on the left, you can see that there's one branch that goes all the way up here, but there's 2 options. You know, if this part happens to be sick, diseased, not looking too strong, believe it or not, this could be your central leader. Eventually you'll get it to go upwards. But as it is right now, I've made a bit of a mess here, but this original one is probably our better central leader, and you would remove this side branch. And let's see if we can get an eraser to happen here. Oh, and eraser. So we'll get rid of that. Good. So here we've got, this is probably going to be removed, and there's our central leader. Okay, but here we have another competing central leader. At the same height of our first central leader, we got a secondary branch, and it wants to be the central leader too. It wants to be the tallest one. And we are going to have to cut that back a little bit. So there are no competing central leaders. So you can see where this red line is. That's a nice place to cut. You're not removing the entire scaffold branch, but you are shortening it so it doesn't compete with your leader. Okay. So guys, in the chat box, while I figure this out, tell me, which is the central leader, on the left or on the right? Let's see what you guys have to say about that. I am going to open the chat box and we'll see what you say. Take me to your leader. Hey, Laura got it. Yay, she got it. Good for you. Okay, left, right, 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 right. Oh, good. A lot of people like the right one. Any other lefties? Either. Haha, Cheryl says either. Okay, Cheryl, you got it. I'm closing this. Either is fine. Now, some of you may have said right because maybe it looks a little stronger or it looks a little straighter. That's okay. But if you come right up close and you see, hey, there's a little bit that looks diseased, maybe I'll choose the other one. That's fine. And you may cut this leader right down to where it intersects in this fork, or you may just cut up like above a few buds and leave it to be one of your scaffold branches. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So one of your optional cuts could be, let's see where the buds are. There's a bud there. Here's a bud here, and that bud would go outward. So we're hoping that it could go there. You may do what Norm did and find the lowest bud, like this bud, because you want your branch to be as horizontal as possible rather than a branch that goes up and over. We want to try and avoid those. So you've chosen your central leader. Okay, great. Take me to your leader. So here we've got our leader, and we'll talk about zigzags in a minute. This is a tree that is now much, much older in Ben Nobleman Park. It is a cherry tree, and I had a beautiful central leader until I found disease on that central leader. So I made a cut here. I should go back. I made a cut here. I had this perfect central leader, but I had to cut off this part. It wasn't doing well. There was a bud. Clearly the bud went in this direction. Okay. The next year I thought I got to get this to go central again. After all, it's supposed to be a central leader. I found a bud going back in that direction. And that was the following year's growth. And let's see what happened the year after that. So year 1, year 2, and then year 3, I found a bud taking it up to be central again. So central leaders do not have to be perfect. Okay, great. So that's step number 1, take me to your leader. Step number 2, you want to look for platforms. And again, for those of you with older trees, these are organizing principles, and they're teaching you a big lesson. Your tree may be a mess of branches, but when you look at the platforms, this theory about platforms, you're going to understand that you need a lot of empty space between platforms. You need to see that there's empty space in the tree for air circulation. So what are platforms? Let's have a look. There's our first platform, and there's our second platform. Okay, so what I want you to do with your young tree that just sprouted branches is you're looking for 3 to 5 branches around the same area in the tree that go in different directions, sort of like north, south, east, west. Okay, because if they're all on the same side and they're all in the same direction, they're going to shade each other out. So think of the spokes of a bicycle wheel. They will all go in different directions. Super duper. And each platform will be 2 to 5 feet higher than the one before. Now, 5 feet is if you've got a really big tree. 2 feet, 3 feet, yeah, for sure, any size tree. We want to make sure the cat or the baseball, not the baseball, or the football can get through these branches. So if you have scaffold branches in between your platforms, your chosen platforms, what are you going to do? So let's say there is a branch right here. What are you going to do? You're going to cut it off. It's a perfectly healthy branch, but you're going to get rid of it. Okay, because you've chosen these 3 as your platform. Okay, so a newly planted tree, if it has branches, it may have 1 platform. You remember Norm's we had a little sprout there with some little sort of a little whip, and then it just had a few little tiny branchlets coming out. So it may have 1 platform, it may have 2, it probably won't have more. And the lowest platform should be knee high or higher, because you don't want your fruit to be hanging on the ground. So knee high is your lowest platform. Great. Okay. So let's see what we've got here. As I said, we're removing excess scaffold branches to ensure, and we are also ensuring that when we choose a perfect platform branch, that it's not sickly. So you may say, hey, this branch looks great, it's in the right direction, but it's got this big goopy part right here, which you suspect is a sign that it's not super healthy. Well, you're probably right. So even though it's the perfect branch, cut it off, something else will emerge over time. And that's the beauty of young trees. They are so easy to mold like that. So this is a young tree, the first 3 years, let's say, once you've chosen your platforms, you can tidy up the branches. If there are any lateral branches that go straight up and down, straight up or straight down, you can cut them off. You can remove them correctly. I'll show you how to cut in a couple of minutes, just to give it a little cleanup, because if there's any branches going inwards, cut them off. Okay, like that, you would cut them off. We're trying to very quickly improve the air circulation. Step number 3. Okay, in the chat box, what's step number 1 and step number 2? Quick. In the chat box, if I can find the chat box. Ooh, I don't know where to find the chat box. Oh, here it is. Okay, step number 1, step number 2, put in the chat box. Have I got you guys sleeping already? Oh my goodness. I'm working you too hard. Leader, and platforms. 1 is leader, 2 is platforms. Find your platforms. That's number 2. Good. Central leader and platforms. Good. You guys got it. Just making sure you're not sleeping. Is that okay, guys? I hope so. All right, next step, step number 3, clean up the messy stuff, which I kind of tackled in the last step. You want to get rid of upward branches, downward branches. You want to get rid of suckers, which are little branches that come out of the roots. Those upward branches are called water sprouts. Water sprouts, that's spelled wrong. Downward branches, get rid of. Upward branches, get rid of. Okay, so you're just cleaning up the messy stuff here. And messy stuff could also mean diseased branches. If there's a diseased branch, get rid of it. If there's a crisscrossed branch, that means one branch is scratching up against another. Well, take your pick which one you're keeping, but you do have to get rid of the 2 that are rubbing up against each other because that is going to cause a wound. And wounds are an entry point for pest and disease problems. Okay, number 4, retain an appropriate number of fruit-laden branches. In the first 2 years, you're going to be removing all the fruit anyways. But after that, you want to make sure that you're retaining some buds. So as you're pruning and having a great time, just make sure that you're not taking away these nice spurs. So just keep an eye on it. Different types of trees have different types of fruiting branches. This is a super quick workshop, so I may not be able to show you all what they look like, but apricots, oh yeah, here I've got a picture coming up. So this one, I think this is apricots or it's plums. I can't remember. This might be plums. So these are fruiting little branchlets in your plums. So if you want to have some plums on your tree, but not overload a young tree, you can cut some of these off. But if you cut every single one of them off, you will definitely have no fruit, right? So keep those things in mind. And if you have little branches like that, it's okay if they're pointing upward or pointing downward. That'll be fine because these are not branches that will be your structure. They are fruiting spurs and fruiting branches, branchlets. Oh, good, I have this too. So this one, that last one was apricots. This one is plums. So again, you're doing your pruning. Just remember these guys, they're fruit, right? So you can prune them off if it's early in the, you don't have to. You'll be taking off the fruit when it's older. You can prune some of them off though, if it's a young branch and a young tree that you don't want too much fruit on. And finally, step number 5 is you will, after you've done all of the above, and you've got a young tree with, gosh, maybe 10 branches, go to the end of the branches and snip off the last few buds of the branch. So let me tell you why. What it does is it gives energy to the tree and encourages the tree to grow. What you've actually done is you've removed a hormone called the auxin hormone, and the auxin, AUXIN, suppresses these buds, the lateral buds on the branch. So it's telling the lateral buds, I am the end bud, I'm the terminal bud, I am dominant, I'm going to keep growing longer. When you cut that end bud off, boom, then all of a sudden the other buds are free to do what they want, and you'll get more sprouts, more blossoms, more branches coming from them. So snip the tips, especially with a young tree. If you've got a huge old apple tree, you can pretty much skip this step because that would take you a long time. Okay, let me just check how I'm doing for time. Oh, guys, I'm sorry, this is very tight. I forgot this is quite a big workshop. Usually I do it in a couple of hours. So maybe I should have thought of that. So let's plow through. Hopefully you're okay for time. So reviewing, what are the 5 steps? Put them in the chat box quickly. I want to see that you remember what the 5 steps are. Super quick. Let's see what you guys have to say. 5 steps to winter pruning. Okay, any answers? Nobody gets to sleep in my class. No, no, no. Oh, I guess everybody gets to sleep. Any answers, guys?
It just takes a couple moments to type.
Okay, okay. I got to make sure you guys are with me. That's fine. Okay, had to type fast on the phone. Thank you. I forget that people are watching on their phones. Yes, that is annoying. That is a bit challenging. Okay. Laura, fastest one, leader, platform, messy stuff, fruiting branches, clip off, 2 or 3 buds. Oh, you guys are amazing. I'm seeing that. Laz has it. Leader, platform, cleanup, fruit, snip, Davis. Okay, you got it. Let's keep going. So let's keep going. Now we know the 5 steps. And in my book, Growing Urban Orchards, I go through this. I'll see if I have a handout to send to Marissa to remind you, but hopefully you're taking notes. So we're going to spin through some stuff, but this needs time, a little bit of time. When you're pruning your tree, you got to make good cuts, because if you cut incorrectly, you can damage your tree. So let's go through what you need to do. You need some basic tools. You need your hand pruners. Okay, they're your best friend, especially with a young tree. And for older trees, you're going to need a pair of loppers. I think most of you know what loppers look like. There's a big pair of loppers that I use. A really big old tree, you'll need a handsaw. Okay, those are our main tools. 2 main kinds of cuts, heading back cuts. Remember I talked about snipping tips? Heading back is when you shorten a branch. Okay, you're shortening a branch that's too long, or you're shortening your central leader on your tree. You cut just after a leaf bud and choose an outward facing bud so the new branch doesn't grow inwards. Remember what I was talking about? We want branches growing outwards. So if I do a beautiful cut, but the bud that remains is pointing towards my face or my central leader, that's not a good cut, even if you've done it lovingly and carefully. So let's see how that's going to look. Here are some options. Okay, which cut is the right one? So here somebody has cut over here. There's the last bud. They've given maybe an inch or something after the bud. Here the cut is right after the bud. Here the cut is on an angle above the bud, maybe 1/4 of an inch. Here the cut is on an angle and there's the bud. So I don't know which one you think is the best one, but I'm going to just tell you just because we're running a little low on time. Oh, no, I thought I had a slide. The problem with this one is this part of the branch will die and become an entrance point for disease. Okay, so we don't want to leave stubs at all, right? So that's leaving too much. That's a whole inch. The problem with this one is you've cut so close to the bud that you may have damaged the bud. So that bud needs to grow a branch. And if it's damaged, you'll basically have this whole area die, and that would not be good. So now it's between these bottom 2. And they're both okay, but this one is better. The reason I don't like this cut is that if there's moisture or something, it can drip onto the bud and rot it. Right? So the habit is that if your bud is on this side, you want the angled cut away from the bud. Your angled cut is on a 45-degree angle, and it is 1/4 of an inch above the bud. That's the habit that you just get into. So you do that lovingly and carefully. Then there's the thinning out cuts. Okay, so here, thinning out cuts, well, let's see what I say in this. Okay, that removes an entire branch. Remember those scaffold branches often. A thinning out cut removes an entire branch from your tree. And the collar, this beautiful area here, this is ingenious. You leave the collar. So every branch, if you look carefully, you can see it has a sort of turtleneck around it. And that's the mechanism that will eventually grow to heal the tree. It's quite beautiful. If you cut this part off, your tree can't heal. Here, the person has left too much. Okay, so here, if they cut and they're just afraid to get too close to the tree, well, this part will die and this will become an entrance point for pests and diseases. Okay, so we want to leave the collar and cut or saw right after the collar. Great. So there's a thinning out cut, and you can see the collar right over here, how beautiful nature is. And then, yep, so that collar is going to protect the tree from pests and diseases. This is magical. This is an older tree, not a fruit tree, but showing how magical trees are when they heal themselves. Now, this is ridiculous. It's actually in the wrong order. When you have to cut a thicker branch, for those of you with older trees, you may have to, when you're pruning your older tree, rather than cutting little branches in there, you're looking at this big mess of a tree, and you're going to have to remove some scaffold branches. One big scaffold branch could clear out a whole empty area in your tree. If you do that, you need to do it super carefully in 3 steps so as not to rip the trunk of the tree. If where this number 3 is, you just did that cut directly, this whole branch could get so heavy and pull downwards, ripping and landing on your head or on your house or whatever. That wouldn't be good, tearing the tree. So what you do, sorry about this. So what you do is you do 1 cut upwards from the bottom. I call it the uppy cut. Number 2, I call outie. So you go a little further out and cut halfway down. So halfway up, halfway down, the branch gets nice and heavy and starts to sort of lean downwards. And then you do cut number 3. The whole branch will come off beautifully and cleanly. 3 cuts. First cut, second cut, third cut. Okay, that helps to protect the bark. So quick sum, winter pruning at different ages. First 3 years is the most important, and winter pruning creates a structure for the tree that allows all the branches to get equal amounts of sun and promotes good air circulation. And winter pruning also encourages vigorous growth in a young tree. It encourages the roots and the branches to grow well. I don't have time to talk about that today, but if you go online and in the handout I've given you, there is a page on orchardpeople.com that's called When to Prune Your Fruit Tree. And that talks about exactly how winter and summer pruning affect fruit tree growth. So that would be important for you to look at, when to prune your fruit tree. Year 4 onwards, you are just working to keep that structure, to keep your tree smaller. You are heading back or shortening those longer branches to keep your nice triangle shape. You're removing suckers or water sprouts, the upward branches, the downward branches. And if a scaffold branch breaks, you will have to cut it off, but you're going to allow another one to emerge on the tree over time. So it's a little different. Okay, finally, this is super important. You got to be clean, because if your tree is diseased, you can spread disease from one tree to another. So how do you clean your tools? You keep your tools clean by disinfecting them with rubbing alcohol. So what I like to do is I carry a little bucket in my orchard filled with some rubbing alcohol, and I dip my tools in and then wipe them off with a clean rag. Some people put the rubbing alcohol in a little sprayer, they spray the tool and then wipe it clean. So you don't have to do that between every cut, but if you're pruning tree A, the first tree, you clean your tool, you prune your tree, and then you clean your tool before pruning the next one, just in case there is a pathogen. If the tree is sick, there's certain kinds of diseases where you may have to clean, if you're cutting off a branch that's oozing with disease and goop, it's probably diseased. So cut the branch carefully, clean your tool with alcohol, and then go on and continue cutting. You just don't want to spread the disease from branch to branch. Okay, so summer pruning is a little different. So if winter is shaping the tree, you're working with a dormant tree, no leaves, no flowers. Summer pruning, you're cutting off diseased, that's funny, diseased branches or damaged branches. But summer pruning also helps keep your tree compact. And you'll read about that when you go to orchardpeople.com, and in the search bar, go when to prune fruit trees. And that has a whole article on the science behind that. But summer pruning helps to keep your tree compact, whereas winter pruning encourages growth. Remember, I was talking about if there are 10 buds and they only have 7 of them, each branch gets longer. Summer pruning is a little different. It slows growth a bit. In the summer, you can also remove branches that are shading other branches. Okay. And I once did an interesting fun test with my 2 apricot trees, exactly the same cultivar, planted side by side. One I did winter pruning and one I did summer pruning. And you can, I don't know how well you can see in this picture, but I could definitely see the difference in how the tree grew depending on when I pruned it. Okay, so this is the one that I pruned in the winter. It spurred lots of these upward branches. Ooh, these are not useful fruiting branches, making a mess out of my air circulation. And this one has a few of the upward branches, but mostly it's quite open still. The structure is beautiful and open. Pruning is energy management. I'm going to let you get that information out of the article, When to Prune Fruit Trees. I think there's a link on your handout. And finally, pruning out disease. So what does disease look like? That's a whole workshop in itself, but canker is very common. It's a name for a problem on your branch, basically. And so it can look like a hard, crusty patch. It can look like oozing goop. People call it sap, but often it's disease. Like sap should be in the tree. When it oozes out, it kind of is a sign something not good is going on. So when you see the canker, you don't want to cut just right here, because what's happening is the disease has started further in the branch. So you'll give yourself a couple of inches and cut back here after a bud. You never cut out of nowhere. You're looking at those buds. And when you see that the inside of the branch is nice and clean and dry, you know you've got the right place. If the inside of the branch, you can see it's wet in the middle, cut further back. That wet is probably the pathogen. So when you're pruning out disease, you want to do it in dry weather because disease spreads on moist, damp days. And cut at least 2 inches before the problem. Place your diseased branch in a garbage bag. Do not put it in the compost because it'll still spread in the compost. So just put it in a garbage bag or put it in the city compost and get it off the site. And then sterilize your pruners. Black knot is a disease with plum trees. You have to cut off the whole branch there because this stuff spreads quickly. So you'd go right back to the trunk of the tree. I'm going to end it here, guys. I'm going to say you need to be bold, right? When your fruit tree is young, that's your time to prune. Don't be too tame. So that's why you saw, like, we were weeping in tears when Norm Herbert came to prune our trees, and we were so upset with him. But in the end, those trees have a great structure because he was bold. He did the right thing. He took a chance. He didn't take a chance because he's done it for so long. So when the tree is young, you do have to make those bold cuts and take a chance. And you'll see the results the very next year. And as you work with your trees, you will get to know them and you'll see how they respond to the pruning. I'm just going to spin here, pruning older trees. Okay. With older trees, I want you to remember, prune no more than 20 to 25% of the canopy each year. So you may look at this tree and say, oh, I can fix up the air circulation, and you literally cut off half of the canopy, then you're just going to get more growth out of that. So let me show you what happens when people prune too much. This is what happens. The tree freaks out. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And it's reaching towards the sun, trying to survive. So no more than 20 to 25% if you are pruning an older tree. Here's a cherry tree in the neighborhood. You can see this has quite good air circulation actually. But that had to happen over a few years. It was neglected. If it had been pruned right from the start, this tree would not be 3 stories tall. It might be this tall, right? You would have kept a good shape. You would have kept the size by once it gets big enough by summer pruning. It didn't have to be this big, but right now there's good air circulation, at least in this picture. If you are interested, I have a book and you can get it at orchardpeople.com/book. And that has a whole section on fruit tree pruning. I also have a podcast with lots of information about growing fruit trees. And this is where you're going to get lots more information about the topics that I'm talking about, plus, a lot more stuff. And I teach a whole bunch of courses online when you're ready to get into more detail about soil, about pruning, a certificate in fruit tree care, everything. Anyways, this is the document I've given you guys. So let's see, how to prune old apple trees is in there. That'll be helpful for the people with mature trees. I think I forgot to put in the link for the one when to prune fruit trees. So please search for that because that's fun information. Okay, oh my gosh, that was epic. I'm going to turn off my share. And we are at 2:09. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, well, no, listen, you had so much information to share with us all, and we're so grateful for all of your expertise. There was a lot to take in, and I definitely learned a lot. I'm sure everybody here can say the same. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you. Do you have a couple moments if there's any like pressing questions for anyone that needs to jump off the call? I know, time is very crucial at the moment. Please feel free to do so. We will be sending a playback link for everybody. And if you have a question that you need to answer, just type it in the chat and we will get to it. And I will share the answers with you in the end in that playback link. But we'll just get to some questions if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Here, Jen says, my pear tree has orange spots in the leaves. Is that a disease? Shall I prune the branches with the orange rust spots on those leaves?
Okay, so not all diseases can be solved with pruning. So what you have is called pear trellis rust. You can look that up. Don't prune off those branches. Nothing wrong with the branches. That's a fungal disease. Remember I said, Jen, how when you don't have good air circulation, it's sort of moisture collects and fungal spores come and they land. So the best thing you can do is when those leaves fall, and they probably have already, clean them up meticulously, put them in a bag and take them off the site. You want to get rid of the pathogen. So pruning will do nothing. Pruning is not an answer for every disease. It's an answer for some diseases.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much for that. We do have lots of people saying thanks for the awesome information, but more questions are, what is the ideal height for apple and pears to maintain?
So great question. That's from Cheryl. And Cheryl, I love your question. That depends on the type of tree you bought. Fruit trees are on different root stocks. Some fruit trees are dwarfing. They'll never grow, even if you don't prune them at all, they'll never grow more than 7 feet. Some trees grow to 20 feet. But even they're called semi-dwarf trees, which is probably as big as you get for apple trees. Nobody wants the full-size trees anymore. If you prune correctly from the very year you plant the tree, you can keep it compact. And I would say the ideal size is maybe 14 feet to 16 feet tall, maybe 14. Who needs a ladder? Do things with pole pruners, keep it nice and compact with correct pruning. Okay, let's see.
And we have Jay saying, having massive biennial bearing issues with my apples. Any pruning techniques to help? Don't want to use PGRs.
I don't know PGRs. I should know, but perhaps I don't. But
I don't.
Chemicals, I'm guessing. Okay. So biennial pruning is often resolved biennial bearing is often resolved by correct pruning. So you are again not letting your tree go nutso with fruit one year and then it conks itself out. It can't do the next year. If you prune correctly, you shouldn't have that problem. Saying that, depending on the cultivar, there are some apricot trees that just do like to produce fruit every second year. But pruning will help. Try it and you'll see the difference. Oh,
Okay,
plant growth regulators. Thank you. Yeah, don't use that. Oh my God, no.
and one of the questions being that I know from our office, some of us have inherited old apple trees that I don't think ever have been pruned in our yards and things. Can you're saying if we sort of start to take care and prune 20 to 25% each year, we can sort of nurse it back to health maybe
Oh my
and get a
gosh.
good yield? I don't know.
Those trees are a gift. They are a beautiful gift. And guys, if you have one of those trees and you think the fruit tastes bad, don't cut it down. It's not the tree. So in 4 years, you'll have beautiful fruit from that tree. So just 20 to 25% a year, a little bit of pruning. And again, you get this big mess of branches all around, right? Look into the canopy. It could be one cut a year. One scaffold branch may clear out a whole area this year. And next year, you'll find another scaffold branch that has loads of lateral branches coming off of it. And then that one will go. And over time, you will create a shape. That is a treasure. You can graft different varieties onto that tree. Don't cut it down. It's a beautiful treasure.
Thank you. That is so, so exciting. We do have Sally who's saying, my crabapple tree was hit with LDD moth. Do you think it will recover?
LDD, which tell me what you think LDD is.
LDD moth.
Codling moth? In any case, insect problems are definitely annual. So you haven't, and boring insects can really destroy a tree if they go into the tree and they're sort of, gypsy moth. Oh, it's now called that. You're not supposed to call it gypsy moth. I forgot. Sorry, didn't remember that. Gypsy moth comes and goes. There are ways to control it. I do a whole workshop on integrated pest management, but let's see if I can spin it in my mind. So yeah, lots of ways to control it. There are lots of ways. One, holistic sprays. This is, you can use certain holistic sprays made with molasses that actually help a tree photosynthesize so that their sap isn't tasty for moths and chewing insects and sucking insects to actually eat from the tree. That's a little bit more complicated. Simple solution. When you see the LDD moth, pick it off and smush it. Just get it when it's young. Just get rid of it. The other solution is once a year in the early spring, there is an organic spray, lime, sulfur, and dormant oil. You mix it together, lime, sulfur, and dormant oil. It's not sulfur, lime, sulfur, and dormant oil. Read the instructions carefully. You spray that once a year in the early spring when the tree is dormant. Do not spray it if any of the buds are opened. You're too late. That will help coat the tree and smother any overwintering bugs, and it helps with LDD moth as well.
Okay, that is wonderful. I think that at the beginning we had 1 or 2 questions. I'll just look at those ones quickly and then I'll let everybody, I'll just give you your time. I know that we only said till 2,
That's okay.
so I appreciate you staying on a little longer. We had Vito saying that they have an old pear tree and blackberry tree that are quite tall and need pruning. Where do they start on a 35-foot tree?
Well, sorry, which kinds of trees? It was a plum and
It
something
said an
else.
old pear tree and a blackberry tree.
Blackberries are bushes. That's a little different, but they still need good air circulation. Let's
Okay.
talk about the old pear tree. Exactly what I said. Where do you start? Look up into the canopy. Have a look and say, is there one scaffold branch with all its lateral branches that if I cut, it'll clear out a big space? That could be the answer. Or you can go in, you can find a bunch of laterals and start sawing them out. Just try and get to see the sky. Just keep in mind 20%. You will never have your perfect central leader shape. it's too late for that, but you can even think, if there was a central leader, maybe there even is, that's my central leader. I'm going to organize from there. But if there's no central leader, look up and make your pick. Just open up the air circulation. And I see
Thank you.
Sally also asks, is the IPM course available online? All my courses are available online at learn.orchardpeople.com. So you can see all of them there.
Okay, and
Yeah.
that's a really lovely way to conclude. I just wanted to tell everybody that I will definitely share all the resources that Susan has shared with us. I will send out that PDF with all of the links, as well as the links that she was telling us to look up. I will include those in the follow-up email just to make it really simple. You'll have everything in one spot, as well as the playback for this workshop. And I really just want to thank everyone for joining us today. I really, and thank you, Susan, especially for sharing all of your knowledge with us. And yeah, everybody here is saying thank you in the chat, and they really appreciate it.
Oh, it
So
was
I hope
really fun, guys. Sorry, I had to rush through it. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot. This usually takes me 2 hours. So hopefully I didn't bombard you too much.
No, it was wonderful. So I'm going to sign off for everybody and wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. And again, thank you. And we look forward for you to join us in future workshops.
Okay, take care, everybody. Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.